So we're going live now. Start.
So, Bismillah, توكلنا على الله. We're starting our webinar. Your Excellency, Engineer Mohammed Musa Lamiri, esteemed speakers, Professor Walid and Dr. Bridget, and ICBA's colleagues, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar today. I see it as an excellent opportunity to talk about a subject which is, I am sure, we all share the passion for. We are all, and we know that the water is the source of life. It is precious beyond measure. Indeed, it is a resource that we know that it is scarce and we cannot put a price tag on. But the way we often use it to tell a different story, as scarce as it is in different parts of the world, and particularly marginal environment, water is unfortunately not valued in an appropriate way. The lack of water for drinking and other purpose is not confined to a specific region. In fact, water scarcity affects every continent. Worse still, about 4 billion people experience severe water scarcity during the last 1 month of the year. Agriculture, a sector which accounts for some 70% of all the fresh water, withdraws globally, and it's critical to rural livelihood in many countries. Is seriously undermined by water scarcity in arid and semi-arid regions. Hence, food security and nutrition are at risk too. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations, 3.2 billion people live in agricultural areas with high to very high water shortages or scarcity, of whom 1.2 billion people live in a severely water-constrained agricultural areas. Alas, population growth and climate change will only increase the problem and contribute to it severely. It is therefore crucially important not only to manage sustainably the fresh water, but also to find better ways to utilize other types of water for agriculture and food production, among other uses. In the Middle East and North Africa, for example, which is a home of 12 out of 17 most water-stressed countries in the world, the potential of alternative sources like treated wastewater and saline water remains largely untapped. This is a major missed opportunity, as the economic and the social cost of water scarcity will continue to rise in the fact of climate change. According to the World Bank, climate-related water scarcity causes economic losses of 6 to 14% of GDP by 2050. Future food security is also at risk. And also, as we have in the region over the coming decades, are not optimistic to say the least. For instance, we have done extensive research here at ICBA and in the UAE on the cost and benefits of treated wastewater use. What is more, we are currently leading a project that aims to support decision-making on treated wastewater reuse for agriculture and food production in the country. Our center has also carried out a number of projects on water-saving technologies in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa. More importantly, we have conducted since 2013 a research program on inland and coastal integrated agri-aquaculture system, which we use rejected brine and seawater for irrigation. This work forms an integral part of our efforts to contribute to national initiatives on sustainable water management in various countries, and above all, to the Sustainable Development Goals. as we have some distinguished scientists and experts with us today. I am sure we will learn about other examples of research and innovation on sustainable water management. So I very much look forward to listening to the discussion and exchange of ideas and expertise on this important subject. Thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to this productive discussion this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Tarifa, for your opening remarks. And we would like to start the seminar. And so today we have our colleague from the Minister of Climate Change and Environment, His Excellency Mohamed Musa Almeri. He will be giving the opening remarks. We have from ICBA, our colleague Assad Quercy, who is an expert in small irrigation systems. We have also the presentation of Professor Waled Khalid Al-Subari, talking about the sustainable water management systems in the CCC countries. And we have our presenter, Brigitte Scalon, which is a senior research scientist at the Bureau of Economic and Geology at the University of Texas, which will be talking about the use of satellites in accessing water resources. So with that, I would like to invite His Excellency Mohamed Musa Almeri to give the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to ICBA for organizing this webinar on crucial topic, which is valuing water in agriculture in marginal environment, and for its efforts to enhance the power of research and innovation to develop groundbreaking solutions to complex challenges related to the water and agriculture, playing an instrumental role in our food and energy system. Water is a precious resource across the globe, and it's become even more valuable in arid and semi-arid environment. The United Arab Emirates is situated in arid desert region with average rainfall under 100 millimeter per year, resulting in water scarcity as a water deficient country. The UAE enhanced national efforts for water conservation, finding new water resources, and implementing innovation water management technology for better water use. Our 2036 water security strategy aimed to reduce total demand for water resource by 21%, increase the water productivity index to $110 per cubic meter, reduce the water scarcity index by 3 degrees, and increase the reuse of treated water to 95%. In line with the strategy, our priorities are to cut down average water consumption per capita to half while promoting sustainable practices overall. This will help save over $20 billion in addition to reducing CO2 emission associated with water desalination by 100 million metric tons. Ladies and gentlemen, the strategy has both supply and demand side intervention. Agriculture consumption, around 70% of total fresh water in the country. The over extraction of our underground water for crop irrigation has led to decreasing supply of water. To address this issue, our government has built around 115 dams to augment the underground aquifers, introduce drip irrigation across more than 80% of our cultivated land, and launch an awareness campaign for farmers about the significance of water conservation. controlled environment agriculture. Part of the protected agriculture practice save water from 70 to 90%, while also increasing productivity. Water use will play significant role in achieving the national strategy target. Our vision is to conserve every drop of water and make the most of it using the latest technology and best practice. We firmly believe that joint efforts are key to finding impactful solution to the water scarcity challenge, with water being an essential resource for every sector. We must engage all stakeholders in identifying and adopting sustainable water management methods and promote an exchange of successful experience in this space across entities and industries. Let us all work together to leave a sufficient supply of water for the next generation. Thank you for all, and all the best for the discussion and the outcome of this webinar. Thank you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Professor Walid Khalid Al-Subari. And please, the floor is yours.
Can you see the presentation, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, let me at the outset first to thank ICBA and Dr. Tarifa for providing me with the opportunity to talk with you and for their kind invitation and to talk about something very, very important. That's the water agriculture or water food nexus in our region. It is one of the major concerns in our region, and we have to really address this issue, from a scientific and technological point. I have been given 15 minutes, so I tried to make 14 slides very quickly. My title is, we'll be talking about sustainable water management system in the GCC country from the perspective of the water agricultural nexus. And if you would allow me to just give you an overview, I will be jumping immediately to the main water resource challenges, and I'm going to be selecting only those that are related to our meeting here, which is the agriculture and water. I'm not going to be talking about the municipal water or the vulnerability of the domestic water supply or other things. I'm just going to be focusing mainly on the water and agriculture. And then I will talk also on the agriculture sector challenges and proposed sustainability policies from a water perspective. I come from the water tribe. I don't come from the agricultural tribe. So I'll be always talking from a water perspective, and hopefully we'll have some conclusion and recommendations. If we take ourselves from the trunk of the tree and look at the forest from top and look at the water scene in the GCC, we will find that there is an overall challenge that's really, bothering all the decision makers and authorities in the Gulf. It is an increasing in water scarcity. You are having population growth, rapid urbanization, socio-economic development, process that's very accelerating. It's unprecedented, never been seen in other parts of the world. And at the same time, you are having limited conventional water resources. So you will have to rely on non-conventional water resources, which is increasing the cost of water supply to the developing sector. That's the overall, problem that you can see when you look at the water scene. But if we zoom down at really the sectors and the problems that we are facing, you can find that one of the major issues that we are facing is the groundwater overexploitation and rapid mining. And this is actually create conflict and risk between water and local production, meeting our food security. We have also inadequate utilization of wastewater in general. Most of the countries are still in the early planning stage, and there are still a lot of constraints, which I'm going to be talking about. Of course, we have the problem of meeting the municipal water demand and its associated cost, the environmental cost, financial cost, economic cost, all these, but I'm not going to be talking about that. And we have also our water supply system is really under threat of many, hazards that can happen because we rely on desalination. I'm not going to be talking about that too because of the time limit, but I'm going to be talking also about the climate change impact as an additional stressor on all these problems. So if I talk about the first problem that we are facing, or just introduction, the groundwater overexploitation and rapid mining is really a major issue in many countries. Some countries rely, or the groundwater represent a major, component of their water portfolio and water supply portfolio, like Oman, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. They have groundwater representing a major, input in their socio-economic development system. And overall, it's about 80% of our water needs are coming from groundwater. Where does that water goes? It goes actually to the agricultural sector, where also 80% of our water goes to the, agriculture sector. And that nexus is really, a little bit disturbing because the water utilization in our agriculture system is not actually as an efficient one, and it's threatening our water supply or water security. Now, we have two types of water resources in the GCC. We have the renewable ones, which are replenished by rainfall. They are in the valleys and the mountains, and those are being overexploited. All of them are being overexploited, and actually we have seawater intrusion in all our groundwater resources happening. There isn't a single groundwater system in the Gulf that's not being invaded by seawater. And also because they are shallow, we have a lot of pollution happening to them because of our anthropogenic activities. The other issue that we are really, this is representing a major dilemma now in the GCC, that you have the non-renewable groundwater, which is being rapidly mined because it doesn't have any, renewability, mined by the agriculture sector, mainly by the agriculture sector. And there are a lot of calls by saying, stop agriculture and let's take it to the domestic water supply instead of putting it in agriculture. And this is really a dilemma. The dilemma, comes from, can we just leave it underground without utilization? Should we look at the immediate gains or the long-term benefits? This is really need a major strategic thinking to maximize the benefit from that. The other thing is that, okay, we are using this for agriculture, but what will happen when this water goes? What we will be doing with all this agriculture investment? Where's going to go? And you can see now that a lot of agricultural investments in Saudi Arabia are moving to Sudan because the water is not there. So this is also a major issue that's really bothering decision makers. What should we do? And what is the replacement water source when this water goes? How going to be fulfilling that the water needs when the renewable goes? Now there are a lot of consequences for groundwater loss. Of course, the overall scarcity will increase, and the strategic reserves will be gone. But at the end, you will be having desertification of your already expanded agriculture. At the end, you will have that hunting back the agriculture sector itself, which is the reason for all this thing. Now, if you look at every country in the world and the GCC, you will find that this issue is there. Seawater intrusion, and so there in Kuwait, shrinkage of freshwater lenses in Qatar, pollution of by nitrate and Al Ain and major agricultural areas. Al Batina, Valley, Sahl al-Batna is desertified completely because of the saline water. But nobody is looking at the value of groundwater depletion in the GCC. Nobody is doing the calculation of how much of our GDP will be lost if we lose this groundwater. There are some studies by the World Bank done in the early 2000, and it showed that you can have 2% of your GDP, consumed by this groundwater deterioration. But we don't have this study in the region. Now, what is happening here? We are having uncontrolled agricultural water consumption. The major drivers are food demand or food security by local production. And also it's a way of socio-economic development that you are distributing lands to the nationals to increase their income through agriculture. That's the main driving force. And sometimes they are coupled together to meet both objectives. And there are a lot of incentive programs for agriculture that has been, put in place, including the water subsidies, which has been treated as a free commodity. No, it's not been giving the value it deserves, and that's why there is an expansion. And you can see here that if you look at 1987 and Wadi Sarhan, Saudi Arabia, barely there is any agricultural activity. And then you can see that in the 1991, what is happening, and the 2000 and 2012, we can see that's a huge, amount of agricultural expansion, but it's all based on fossil groundwater. If this fossil groundwater goes, depleted, that's it. There will be no agricultural activity, and you will see the movement of all these sprinkler and pivot system moving away from the country. And that's a major, losses that will happen, and it will impact your food security too. Now, although there is an expansion in agriculture area, but the rate of growth in the agricultural consumption is not actually in tandem or in line with the agricultural consumption because of many factors. The most important is that we don't control groundwater. Okay, we don't control actually groundwater. Groundwater is widespread. Everybody is using it the way it like. Traditional irrigation methods has been used, very low irrigation efficiencies. There has been a cash crop trend of cultivation like alfalfa and wheat, but alfalfa now is taking over the wheat because of the high demand. We don't have control of the government on the groundwater abstraction. Abstraction rights is that if I own the land, then I can pump as much as I want from groundwater. So groundwater is not being treated as a public property like oil. There is no metering because of the distributed nature of wells. There is very hard to go and meter, especially in Saudi Arabia and UAE and Oman. There is no monitoring. Actually, all these numbers that we are having are actually estimates from agricultural lands expansion, and there is no tariff for groundwater. I mean, there is no price signaling mechanism for the farmer to really think about groundwater as a valuable, commodity. It's just free, so he can use it as much as it's want, and that actually lead, us to the side of supply management. Because we don't have any control on the demand, we always try to provide water. And that's where the wastewater comes. Unfortunately, we do have, large volumes of tertiary treated with wastewater are unused. There are many constraints, and it is a newcomer for the, in our water supply portfolio, but it also has a lot of constraints. There is still a lot of, social repugnancy from that water. There is technical issues. There is infrastructure issues. There's so many issues, but it is going to come and it is going to take its place with time, but still we are behind. Groundwater, treated wastewater is not being taken into account in the national water strategies in general in many countries. It is treated as another source coming from outside the water sector. And Some countries, like what His Excellency has just indicated, that some countries are really taking that source of water seriously and taking it as part of their national water supply system. It's not as something that we have to deal with it outside of the water strategy. It is, as Tarifa said, these are major lost opportunities that we are having here. This is a lot, lost opportunities, especially under the scarcity condition, that you have all that amount of water and not you are using it, whether using it directly or indirectly. You can recharge in the groundwater or use it directly, but I mean, not using it is really an issue. And also there is a problem of the lack of integrated planning between the water supply and the wastewater authority, where you have a lot of loading, or carryover volumes that impact the treatment, but this is another issue. Now we have the third challenge that we are facing, is the climate change impacts on the water resource sector. All the studies now are I don't want to say agreeing, but at least there is uncertainty that the region will have a reduction overall precipitation, and that will of course lead to less surface runoff and less groundwater recharge. Sea level rise is a fact. It will lead to more saline water intrusion and invasion of our coastal groundwater system. Temperature increase will increase our demands in the municipal sector as well as in the agricultural sector. There's a clear relationship between the water needs with temperature, and there is an increasing frequency of extreme events. These extreme events, floods, of a destructive nature, we have already experiencing them, and they are with the frequency of those is happening. We better prepare ourselves for this type of events, and also droughts. For a long time, you will not see a lot of rain. So these are like the whole hydrological system is readjusting itself with the new, with the climate change. And RICAR, Arab Codex has predicted bad things for us. it's for the RCP 4.5, we are expecting by the mid-century 2 degrees or 1.5 degree and so on. So this is, I think everybody knows about that, but we better be prepared for this type of thing. Now, let's go to the other side, the agriculture sector. I mean, the agriculture sector is also, has needs, and these needs has to be fulfilled. And there is always a call for, should we grow or not to grow? I mean, should we just import everything from outside and have our agro investment or not? And local production remains an important and complementary and buffer strategy for regardless of the situation. You must have local production, and you must have a local production that can protect you from price volatility and also shocks like what happened in 2008, 2009, 2007, 2008, the food crisis, and also the Ukraine-Russian war now. It's also showing you that this is food system that we thought it is a stable system. It is not stable anymore. There are a lot of things that can happen. So you must grow locally. But how to grow locally? And that's, I think, the main issue that we have to discuss, how to grow locally. If you want to grow locally, you must adhere to some policies, and you must advocate for some policies. The first one, that all your agriculture policies should be compatible with your available water resources, okay? And you must improve your irrigation efficiency. If you continue with this flood irrigation, dominating something like 75 to 80% of your lands, this is not going to be a good thing for you, because you will lose that water, and once you lose that water, you will lose also your agriculture. You must shift. This is a must. You must shift to modern agricultural systems. I'm talking here about smart agriculture. I'm talking about hydroponics. I'm talking about non-traditional agricultural system. If you don't move there, you can't produce, and the water productivity cannot be increased by just modification of irrigation system. You have to modify your agricultural system. That's very important. People are thinking that by putting a drip irrigation instead of flood irrigation, you will have a major system. You are not going to have a major system. You still have a problem. But to go to a hydroponic system where you can use the water something like 25 times and you produce 10 times the production, that's what we have to do. If you want to really fulfill the, the needs of the market, you must maximize your use of treated wastewater. Okay, but of course, under the strict and health and safety conditions, and you can use that directly or indirectly. I mean, if you, in the farm now, they are injecting that treated wastewater, so the farmer can use it from the other side if they don't want it. But you have to use it. You cannot throw it. It is precious, and it is a major lost opportunity. You must put some policies to discourage cultivation of high-consuming crops like alfalfa and other things. You should not subsidize those at all. You have to discourage them. And if we go to the demand side, I think we should reduce our post-harvesting and food waste. I think food waste is a major issue in the region. We are considered as the highest in food waste because of our lavish lifestyle and so on. But we must think about this side because it really can alleviate the pressures on the food food system you are having. So finally, I think quickly, I think we all agree that water is undervalued in the agricultural sector. Actually, it is a free of charge. It is actually the reason why we are having this overexploitation of our groundwater resources. But if you lose your groundwater, it will not only, you're not going to be losing your water, but you are going to be losing also your agricultural sector. And that has to be clear for the decision maker that I can't expand agriculture on the expense of non-compatible water resources. I think we must start thinking about changing our focus from sustainability of supply, providing the farmer, providing the user with all the needs, to sustainability of consumption. This is very important message that we have to think about it. We are always emphasizing supply management. We should start thinking about efficiency and demand management policies. And if we can apply those, demand management and efficiency policy, and to shift to modern agricultural system and not irrigation system, we can have a degree of sustainability for both the water and the agriculture sector, hopefully. And thank you very much for your time. Can't hear you.
You are muted, I think.
Thank you for letting me know. Thank you, Professor Khaled. Very insightful presentation on the context of the use of water and the value of the water for society. And so our next speaker is Dr. Brigitte Scalon, and she will be talking about the use of satellite information in the use of agricultural water. Please, the floor is yours, Dr. Brigitte.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to talk today, and really enjoyed Professor Khalil's presentation, very insightful. I am from the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm just going to talk about a few things today. Monitoring changes in water storage globally using satellite data, and looking at the controls on changes in water storage, climate relations and human water use, and then discussing about approaches to managing water resources more sustainably. We have had huge advances in satellite data in the past couple of decades, GRACE satellites monitoring total water storage from the land surface to the deep subsurface. And then also big advances in global modeling and regional modeling. Ground-based monitoring is also very important. And then monitoring water use, which is not very widespread, and also looking at the impact of land use changes on water resources. So here I show a map of water storage changes from when the grey satellites were launched in 2002 through January 2022. So the red areas show where we have declines in water storage, and the blue areas are where we have had rises in water storage over the past couple of decades. And as you can see, much of Europe, North Africa, Middle East region, Northern India, and North China Plain, declines in storage, Northeast Brazil, and Southwest and South Central US, extending into Texas, where I am located, and then glaciers and stuff in Northwest US, North America. And then the blue areas where we've seen increases in storage, parts of the Northern High Plains, the Great Lakes region from 2013, parts of South America, and much of the African continent showing increases in storage. So trying to understand what causes these changes in storage is very important. So the stippled area, it's important to consider changes in water storage relative to interannual variability in storage. Early on with the GRACE data, people emphasized the trends in water storage, long-term trends, but the GRACE data are pretty short-term, only a couple of decades, and we really need to put that in longer-term context over the past century in some regions. So the stippling in this shows where the trends, the linear trends in water storage over the past couple of decades exceeds 3 standard deviations of interannual variability. So we have confidence that there are trends in water storage in these regions. So in the Southwest US and many other regions, Middle East, North Africa, etc. However, the blue areas in much of Africa, it's interannual variability that's dominant. And this is related to climate teleconnections with El Nino, Northern Atlantic Oscillation, Indian Ocean Dipole. So in addition to dealing with water scarcity, I think we have a challenge of dealing with droughts and floods, as Professor Walid mentioned. And I think the World Bank is recognizing this more. So it's not just water scarcity, it's dealing with extremes, which we see with the climate change. So managing droughts and floods is very important in many regions. So we have looked at the time series of water storage changes, and I'm not going to emphasize these in many regions, but you can see in North America, you can see a big increase in storage in the Great Lakes region, St. Lawrence, after 2013, related to precipitation. The Northern High Plains are showing increases in interannual variability in water storage. And then the Central Valley, even though we have a lot of interannual variability, overall decline in water storage because the recovery is never enough to make up for the declines. In this region, this is showing total water storage anomalies in millimeters over the time period. So you can see the Euphrates drought 2007 to 2009 and then remained low, and then recovery in 2018-19 period with high precipitation, but still not enough to recover to earlier periods. Northwest Sahara and the Nubian Aquifer, small changes in water storage. Saudi Arabia, general decline in water storage and then maybe stabilizing in recent years. And Iran also large declines in water storage over this time. In the Ganges Brahmaputra, huge decline in water storage and then a slight increase in recent years related to overexploitation of groundwater. The Indus, the North China Plain, and a slight increase in the Tibetan Plateau. Australia, they had the millennium drought that extended to 2010 and then followed by floods. So oftentimes you need intensive floods to end a drought, and so managing both is pretty critical. And then again, drought conditions in more recent years. In Africa, you can see the Kalahari region here, where we see a big increase in water storage up through 2011, peaking at that time and then followed decline. So even though we would calculate an overall increasing trend, this just reflects interannual variability related to climate teleconnections and El Nino conditions. In Western Africa, in Niger, we see an increase in storage that is attributed to land use change, converting from native vegetation to cropland, increasing recharge, and also precipitation variability. And lastly, then in South America, declines in storage in many river basins, Parnaíba, São Francisco, and increase in storage in the Guarani aquifer, and then followed by more recent decline. So a lot of interannual variability, and then in some regions, overall decline in storage. So I think this study by McAllister and others at the British Geological Survey that was published recently was very interesting. There was a lot of emphasis on the grey satellite data on declines in storage in Northwest India and extending into Pakistan. But here, what you can see is from the early 1900s, you can see an increase in storage of up to almost 400 cubic kilometers over this time, attributed to canal irrigation expansion over these decades, and then stabilizing in the 70s, and then a recent decline because of change to using more groundwater irrigation and tube well construction, up to 6 million tube wells installed for irrigation, which is more convenient. So you can see an increase in groundwater storage, even though they had drought conditions in those early decades. And so I think it's extremely important to understand the linkages between groundwater and surface water. And oftentimes people focus on lining canals and stuff and forget that, you know, a lot of that canal irrigation is recharging the groundwater. And if the groundwater is good quality, then if you conjunctively manage both, you can reach more sustainable development. So I think this is, for example, the Murray-Darling Basin, they spent about 6 or 7 billion on precision agriculture, lining irrigation canals and stuff, and didn't take into account that they were losing that recharge, and realized that they didn't see the benefits that they expected because they didn't do a full water accounting. So here in Saudi Arabia, then this is NASA data showing decline in storage and then stabilizing since about 2013, when the government changed policies about agriculture. And this shows Professor Waleed's irrigation expansion in this region from 1991. You can see the center pivots from satellite data, and then the expansion to 2000, and then further intensification through 2012. So unsustainable use of groundwater. We have the same in the Southern High Plains, where the irrigation rates are up to 10 times the recharge rates, so highly unsustainable. So I just want to show one example then for the US, and we all know that irrigation is the elephant in the room in terms of water use. And you can see the Central Valley in California and the High Plains region irrigation, and then Mississippi region. So the 98th meridian marks the difference between humid regions in the eastern US and arid regions in the west. And this yellow shows cropland that's mostly dry land. I just want to show one example of water use data. So here you show, we show in reds the declines in storage during the grace period, and this is the southern part of the Central Valley. So 2010 was a wet year, and here we show water use, and the deep blue color is groundwater irrigation, and the light blue is surface water irrigation. So during wet periods, then there's a lot of surface water that's transported to this southern arid region. And so it's about 70% surface water irrigation that's recharging groundwater. During the middle of the extreme drought, then in 2015, it shifts to 70% groundwater irrigation. And so you're losing that recharge from surface water and you're exploiting the groundwater. In contrast, then in the Mississippi Basin region, you can see we're pumping more groundwater from the Mississippi Basin for irrigation than we are from the Central Valley. And very few people talk about that. But this groundwater in this humid region is actually capturing surface water. So even though they're pumping groundwater, it's not coming from storage, it's capturing surface water. So we really need to understand those linkages. And some people, we can do it more sustainably in this region based on GRACE data. And the regional models for this region suggested large declines in water storage because they didn't adequately represent that connection between surface water and groundwater. And World Wildlife Fund was recently looking at a study, could we move agriculture from the Central Valley region in California to Mississippi? An interesting analysis. You know, we sort of say, well, most of our vegetables and everything in the US comes from the Central Valley, but I don't think it's something that we should be very proud of, while we produce most of our food in a desert. But there are a lot of issues associated with moving agriculture, socioeconomic aspects, and a labor force, a migrant labor force that they have access to in California and other things. So you can't just simply move agriculture from one region to another. And so, as the previous speaker indicated, you know, we cannot rely on imports either in different regions, and especially as we see the issues with the Ukraine war and other things. But we also need to understand virtual water transport and global food trade, and where water is moving from and to. And you can see virtual water flow embodied in food trade accounts for about 300 cubic kilometers or 300 billion cubic meters of water per year around the year 2000. And the major exporters are the US, accounting for 30%, India 15%, and Pakistan 13%. And many of these regions, they're exporting food from semi-arid regions, and so they're depleting water resources. So that's not highly sustainable. So I think just like to summarize then, the satellites allow us to track water storage variability globally, and also we can see the irrigation expansions in different regions over the past couple of decades. And most of the declines in water storage that we see are in semi-arid regions globally, Southwest US, Middle East, North Africa, and North China Plain and other regions. And putting the GRACE data in the longer term context in Northwest India and Pakistan, there was actually a net increase in water storage of about 350 cubic kilometers. And it's only in the past couple of decades that there have been declines in storage, with the expansion of tube wells and with the low cost of electricity supporting groundwater use. And then in the US, although we pump a lot of groundwater in humid regions like Mississippi, it's not impacting storage because it's being derived, it's capturing surface water. So also virtual water transfers is important in food trade, but I think most countries would like to be food secure also. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Scallon, and I think your presentation has been extremely complimentary to that of Professor Wallet, and it gives us a good overview of, you know, what's next in terms of you know, water management and how to use technology. As was one of the introduction from the Minister of Climate Change and Agriculture, that you know, we need to improve the use of technology to manage water. So I think this is coming together very nicely. And so with that, I will invite the last speaker, Dr. Asad Qureshi, who's been going to talk about is going to talk about the impact of water and the productivity.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you excuse me, I just would all the best for this forum, and I have to be excused. I have another engagement. All the best, and I follow with, of course, Dr. Tarifa about this. All the best. Thank you very much for the all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Augusto. Can you see my presentation?
Yes. we can.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, my two other speakers. They have made my job easy. They already emphasized the importance of water and what we need to do. So I will go through what our institute is actually doing to answer some of the questions which are raised by Professor Walid and Dr. Brigett, and how we are trying to increase the value of water in agriculture in marginal environments and what ICBA is trying to contribute. So when we talk about, because we are talking about value of water, so when we talk about value of water, there are two things which we should remember. The value of water, when we define in general in terms of agriculture, it is the price which serve as a guide to us that where to allocate our resources, which can give us the greatest total economic returns. But when we come into the irrigation water value, for which we all are concerned, then we talk about the increase in crop yields in irrigated agriculture compared to rain-fed agriculture. For example, if you have certain crop and it gives you under rain-fed conditions 1 ton per hectare, and then you grow the same crop in irrigated agriculture that gives you 5 tons per hectare. So the difference of these 4 tons per hectare is actually the value of water that has been added to that crop. So this is the way when we talk about increasing the value of water, then we should estimate in that sense, making rain-fed agriculture as a base, and then see how much increase or beneficial benefits, economic benefits, the water can bring into in terms of increasing the yields. In marginal environments, you see, the valuation of water so far has been a challenge because water is never traded like other commodities, like oil, as the doctor mentioned already. And we don't value it and price it like we price it for municipal use, or we try to price it for industrial use. The reason is very simple, because when we talk about food, we mainly talk about the livelihood of the people, and we consider it an essential item for the life. And because many people are poor who might not be able to pay that price, so the agriculture is considered as the section where we do not want to. You can't see my screen?
We can see your screen, but the slides are not moving, Dr. Assad.
It's not moving?
Still in the title page.
Yes.
Oh,
So I think you need to go to presentation mode, in fact. Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see now?
Now it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So I was talking about that the water for agriculture is not valued or priced like municipal and industrial water. And similarly, you see, when we talk about water scarce regions, a lot of water short countries, they import agricultural commodities from other countries. And the associated value, virtual water value, is also not really accounted for. It's what we account is basically its transportation, it's some inputs and others, but not the value of water, virtual water, which actually is used to grow these crops. And the other problem is that while there are well-established methods to calculate the virtual water, the water which is actually used to grow these crops, there are not many methods available where you can, economic value of that water you can assess. Although it's more than 70% of water is used in agriculture, but so far as the more effort has been done to estimate the price of municipal water, industrial water, and other uses rather than agricultural water. This information of value of water in agriculture actually is very, very important and becoming more important with every passing day, because many governments and individual farmers are not investing in irrigation development because they don't know exactly what value of that water or that irrigation sector they are going to get in terms of economic returns. That's why many developing countries like African countries and Asian countries, their governments are always in doubt how much they should invest in agricultural or irrigation development and what are the benefits compared to other sectors. So that is why it is very important for us to understand how we value that water, particularly in agriculture. What's the problem? So now you see this, if you see, this is a global average value for the 4 major crops, which are normally grown in most part of the irrigated areas: maize, wheat, rice, and soybean. And you see, this is the value of per meter cube of water, which you normally get for these crops, is ranging from $0.05 per meter cube of water to 0.1. Which is very, very low if you compare it with industrial and domestic uses, which is normally from 0.3 going even up to $2.5 per meter cube. So that is why it is important to understand where we should be, which crops we should grow, where we should grow, how much water we should use, and what benefits we can get out of that. And going further, you can say that these are the 16 crops which are most commonly used in many areas, including GCC countries. And if you see that pearl millet, sorghum, barley, which we love to grow these crops, including cassava and others, the irrigation, the water value of these crops is very, very low, not going more than beyond 0.1 to 2. Whereas certain crops like potatoes and sugarcane, they have very high value. So the irrigated areas where these crops are grown, the values are high because their use is high, the output product price is high, and they are not grown mostly benefit for the food security, but as a commercial purpose. So even if you see maize and rice, they are also higher than the other crops, but not high compared to many other crops. Basically, there are 3 factors which can affect the value of water in agriculture and the way we can improve it. Number 1 is the availability of water. Number 2, how much crop yields or the output you get. And the third thing is, what is the market price of that produce in different regions and at what value you are going to sell it. And in marginal environments, more important is because we don't have, as Dr. Walid already mentioned, we don't have enough water. The water that we have is of poor quality. So, and we have heat problem, we have drought problems. So here, to really get the real value of water, what we need to implement is that we try to grow the crops which are salt and drought tolerant, where the water use efficiencies are high, and which can really be used under different alternate water sources like treated water, drainage water, groundwater, which are not of real qualities. That is why in marginal environments, our institute, ICBA, is trying to answer some of these questions: which crops you should grow, how you can grow, how you can improve their water use efficiency under different environments. In UAE, I will talk about the case of UAE. Our 2 major problems for sustainable agricultural development in this country are, or mostly in this region is, number 1, decreasing water quantity and quality. So we are excessive groundwater we are pumping, as already mentioned, and the rainfall is very, very low, and even the patterns are changing. And the second basic problem is that our soil health is very poor. We have very low organic matter. Our fertility is very low, and the soil structures are very low. So under these 2 extremely challenging conditions, how we can practice agriculture That is the problem which this country is facing and many other countries in this region and other regions are facing. The soil health, if we talk about this country, our 75% soil is sandy soil. It has very, very limited capacity to support biological activity. Low water and nutrient holding capacity, it has almost none if you don't use any soil amendments. And the soil degradation in UAE require special management practices. So unless we don't do these practices to improve the soil health, no agriculture is actually possible in this region. And when we talk about the water, as already mentioned, our more than 85% of our supply comes from groundwater and desalination water. And 44% come from groundwater, then almost 52% from desalination water, and about 14% comes from the treated wastewater. And I have already mentioned in this that how the trends are changing and what type of issues we are dealing with, getting with this supply of water. So more than 85% of the water, if you see, is either groundwater or desalination water. So now desalination water is very expensive in terms of cleaning, and groundwater is very expensive in terms of pumping because the depths are very high and a huge amount of energy is used to pump it. And even then you do not get the quality which you really need for irrigation. The groundwater use, what we pump in UAE, about 77% goes to agriculture only. And then some forestry and this, and then you can imagine that how much dependence we have in this country. The agriculture has dependence on groundwater. The large part goes to in Abu Dhabi, where the main agricultural area is present. And in terms of quality, our groundwater resources are extremely poor quality. You can see that only 3% is fresh, which you can say that you can use without any amendment. All other parts are from slightly brackish to highly saline conditions, where you need to do some management practices or some sort of cleaning before you can use it for irrigation. The second problem here is that we are still trying to grow the crops, which are very water intensive. Alfalfa is largely grown here. Rhodos grass is used here, date palms, lemon. They all have about more than 15,000 meter cube per hectare water requirement. As Dr. Walid mentioned, this is something which is alarming, that we are short of water, we are pumping heavy amounts of groundwater, and we are trying to use it. We are using it on very water intensive crops that need to be minimized. Now, what are the solutions? How we can address that problem? So in ICBA, we are trying to introduce resource-efficient technologies that are best suited to the regions which are affected by salinity, sodicity, and water scarcity. So number one is that we should be improving our soil health, which means stability, fertility, and salinity. These are the issues there where we need to work. We are trying to find the ways how we can improve water use efficiency in all sectors by using more efficient, water efficient technologies. And then we are also trying to find out the crops which can be drought resistant, which are heat resistant, which are salt tolerant. And we are also trying to see how we can manage the demand. So unless you manage the demand, it doesn't make sense how much supply we can increase. So we have to work both on supply and demand side. In terms of improving the health, we are trying to use different techniques. Like one of them is the biochar to improve the soil fertility. This biochar can help us in effective soil fertility gains, saving water and soil nutrients. And also reducing the gas house emissions. We have tested different biochar products under greenhouses and field conditions. In greenhouses, we found that, for example, for maize, applying 5 tons per hectare can increase the fresh biomass by 29% and 50% reduction in the fertilizer application. The more controlled experiments in the field trials, for example, we did on pearl millets, that increased the fresh biomass by 46% and water retention by 40%. So this is one of the intervention that we can do to improve the soil health by implying, and then different crops can behave differently, increasing the fresh biomass and conserving the water at the same time. We are also trying to use the different qualities of compost. So you can see different trials that we have done on different crops like cowpea, sesbania, lubla, pigeon bean. These all contain cereal crops, they are grasses, they are trees. And we have found that compost also different increases the fresh biomass up to 30 to 40%, depending on the type of crop which you are using. So you see sesbania, for example, which is one of the salt-tolerant fodder crops, is the highest gains you can get by doing compost. And then similarly for cow and lub crops, you can also improve their biomass production by intervening through the compost. And here you see we have different type of compost that we have used, moving from sludge to other different type of varieties which are available now in the market. Now, in terms of improving the irrigation water use efficiency, we are also doing many types of interventions. Now, most of the crops, if you can see, the water-intensive crops which are normally grown in many areas, rice, soybean, wheat, sugarcane, cotton, these are not the crops which normally grown here. But alfalfa and pasture, as already mentioned, is a very water-intensive crop, but it is still largely grown here. And if you go in terms of the productivity of the water, or the cereals are giving you the highest productivity, up to 2.3 kilograms per meter cube of water used. So oil seeds, fiber crops, and legumes, their water productivity is on the lower side. So when we talk about improving the irrigation efficiency and talking about which crops we should grow, we have to keep in mind that which crops are highly water intensive and what are their water productivities. So from which bracket of crops we should select the crop which can give us higher value of water which we are applying in terms of irrigation. So we are doing different way of doing water management efficiencies. We're using satellite data. We have our own weather modeling techniques, and we use these energy balance equations to calculate evapotranspirations, crop water requirements, so that, and then we use that data to calculate the actual water values which crops need to grow so that the water conservation strategies can be implemented. We also estimate the groundwater abstraction, their use, and how much water we can save by applying different type of irrigation techniques. Like for the date palm is one of our cultural crop which we grow here in the area. And the present water allocation in many farmer fields goes up to 280 liters per tree per day. But with our some of the techniques which we are using here, subsurface drip systems, hydro rock, and many other type of latest irrigation techniques, we have brought it to 50 to 75 liters per day and up to 200 to 250 in the summer and 50 to 75 liters per day. These technologies in general, the different like subsurface drip systems, deficit irrigation, water conservation technology, hydro rock systems, and management of poor quality irrigation water in different ways, that has helped us saving up to 35% of the water. And our research on different technologies and their affordability and adaptability in this region is still going on. We have also done significant work on testing the treated wastewater, particularly on the vegetable crops. So we did work on 6 vegetables, which are the kitchen vegetables everybody grow. And we found a lot of, evaluated the uptake of heavy metals, chromium, zinc, and all these things. And we also calculated their impact on the soil in terms of the management of the heavy metals. So what we found that if we can select the crops properly, the treated wastewater can be used very effectively and without any negative effects to grow food crops also. Also, still largely in UAE, treated wastewater is used for landscaping and for forestry. But what we have found that the health risks and the soil risks by using treated water can be minimized if we select the crops which are really safe to grow with treated wastewater. For example, our research shows that if we grow leafy crops like spinach, lettuce, these type where you eat the leaves of these crops, the probability of intake of heavy metals is much higher than those crops where you eat the fruit like carrots or these tomatoes and cherries and these type of things, where you don't eat directly the leafy plants. And we have already published that work in international literature, and some more work is still going on with our partners in this country and in the other regions as well. Now, one of the main domain of our work here at ICBA is that how we can manage the high water and land salinity, particularly in this part of the world where you have coastal areas, where you have some seawater intrusion, and usually your soils and water both are of extreme salinity contained. So the strategy that we are involving is that we want to conserve fresh water as much as possible for domestic, industrial, and to grow some of the very salt-sensitive crops. For the marginal areas and for the marginal water and land conditions, we are promoting salt-tolerant crops for forages, timber value crops, so that they can be grown more with the saline, under saline conditions using saline water. And then we are also working on different halophytic plants and oil-producing species that can be used under extreme saline conditions like coastal areas and others. And ICBA has done work over the last 20 years to develop many crops which are now available and can be grown successfully under these conditions. Some of this, just to give you an idea, this table gives you summarize that if you have the slightly saline conditions up to 5 decisiemens, then we have salt-tolerant crops. If they are moderately, then these values are here, and then we suggest what they should grow under these conditions. Then these are the different crops on which we are working, and we have their different varieties which are now available. And here you can see our research shows that which crop has threshold value up to which salinity level, so that can help you to choose the right crop for your right condition. It contains forages and other crops as well. Where you can use them, we have listed here that salt-affected biosaline agriculture can be used in marginal lands, in subcoastal saline areas, in coastal lands also. These are particular solutions for those areas. And to conclude, I will only say that the current value of irrigation water is very, very low, as you can see in the lower bar. And there is a large scope to maximize it to that level. That tells us that there's a huge potential that by adopting these water efficient and crop efficient systems, we can still improve the value of irrigation water to almost 3 times what is available at current. So that's where we all should struggle to improve the value of water in agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Assad. And I now have time to go for questions. And So for Professor Wallet, you have talked about the need for the improvement of the water productivity, and the data that you have provided is compelling. So there's an intervention to be made. So if you have to prioritize, this is where the question comes. You have to prioritize from improving the irrigation system or to modify the food production system through innovation, or to introduce policy. Which of the three you will prioritize first? So which one is the most pressing one at this point?
You mean to improve the irrigation efficiencies?
To improve the water productivity. So
Water productivity, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think on the long term, to introduce hydroponic system and smart agriculture and precision agriculture and all these things, it will take some time before you really convey that to the farmers. So I think you have to start building the capacity of the farmers by extension services and so on and so on. And I think training the farmers on the hydroponic systems and smart agriculture, and in a way to convert the traditional agriculture into an industry instead of the traditional agriculture. I think this has to be a priority to be implemented now, so you can reap the fruits after some year. This is very important. There has been a lot of call since the 2000 that we should convert our traditional agriculture into industry or agro industry in order to survive the future. But there hasn't been a lot of interest by the governments to do that, but the private sector already has moved there. And if you go to, for instance in Bahrain, you can see that so many private sectors, because of the lack of land, because of the lack of fertile lands, because of the lack of climatic conditions, and because of the lack of water, they have already moved toward the hydroponics. So we have some major companies really moving toward that thing, and that's a very good, because most of our vegetables now actually fulfilled by soilless cultivation by the private sector, and this is a good thing to do. That really contribute to the food security as well as socio-economic development of the people. So that's one thing that you have to really start doing very quickly to prepare yourself. Time is the essence. You don't have enough time to wait for the market forces to put that. I think you should be proactive and start really implementing that, and try to preach about these methods in your schools, in your education system, in your research labs, and to the farmers. I think this is very important. The second thing, and I think this is very important to say, the wastewater reuse. Okay, I think we have done some scenarios for the future on, for example, just maintaining the agricultural land without expansion and modifying little bit of our irrigation efficiency from its current level to 60% by the year 2035. Countries like Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait, they can fulfill all their agriculture needs by wastewater. The amounts of treated wastewater coming from the urban areas in these three countries, the key really can fulfill all their needs if they just implement a little bit of irrigation efficiencies, measures. And for Kuwait, for UAE, it can fulfill half of its needs. Okay, for Oman, only 10%. For Saudi Arabia, only 10%, because those countries are really, having a huge agricultural sector, and you cannot do it easily. So I think these two things has to be done very, very quickly and has to be emphasized. Of course, the work that's been done by ICBA is great. I mean, I am very impressed by biochar. I'm impressed by this marginal, water utilization. I'm impressed by the crops that you are introducing, and salt tolerant crop. I think this has to be also to be emphasized and to complement the major savings, that can be done. But if I were really, have the liberty to say that If I want to accelerate all this, I will put a price on water.
Of course.
Which I can't.
Yes, I know. No, thank you. Thank you for your remarks. I think I mean the list that you provided to us is the right list of priorities. And so I will move to the next question to Dr. Scalon, because I mean, you were talking about monitoring the groundwater, and then how the aquifers healthiness depend on the irrigation system that you apply. I mean, you showed the data. So if you are to provide or to use this technology in the arid regions, so how do you see the contribution of such technology to improve the water use, even if this is the wastewater, by the way, so in terms of its use and profiting from it?
Thank you so much, Augusta. I think, some of the examples that we have been seeing is where we have access to surface water and groundwater, and the importance of conjunctively managing both of those, and recognizing that we don't want really efficient surface water irrigation, because inefficient surface water irrigation recharges groundwater. And if the groundwater quality is good, then that's not a loss to the system. And so it's almost similar to California when they do ag managed aquifer recharge. So they flood the fields in the winter, and it doesn't impact the tree crops or the almond trees and things like that. And they just flood them to recharge the groundwater. And we have a huge reservoir of depleted groundwater in the US that could be replenished in these ways. So we just need to be creative in how we manage things and understand the connections between surface water and groundwater. And then in terms of irrigation efficiency, in the high plains, they do 70% deficit irrigation, and they do subsurface drip and things like that. But I mean, that sometimes leads to a salt buildup, and because the rain occurs in the summer when the crops are grown, there's not that flushing of the salt. So we also have to be aware of this water and salt balance and how we manage those. But I'm very excited to hear about the hydroponics and all of those things. I think that is fantastic, and I see we see it to a limited extent near urban areas in the US. So I think that is very promising and very efficient. So hope we see more of that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to take the last question to Dr. Assad, because you mentioned something very important in terms of the build-up of salinity in the soil, and Dr. Assad is mentioning that the use of saline water for irrigation is one of an important solution for agriculture. So in the long term, the use of saline irrigation will be sustainable, Dr. Assad. And then what will be the trade-off, and what we need to be aware as we moved into this technology?
Thank you, Dr. Augusto. Whenever we want to use the saline water, the ideal situation is that we should have a drainage system where we can collect the more saline water and then dispose it off to a area which is not close to the irrigated area, and where we can put it in the evaporation ponds or wherever we want. The second important thing in using the saline groundwater or saline water is that we should select the crops, those salt tolerant, so that we do not end up in and they should be salt loving, that can help in reclamation of the soil at the same time. The third thing is that the cropping patterns need to be changed more expensively. If you continue the similar cropping pattern, then the soil properties and its root development, all things will remain common, and the salt accumulation will continue. irrigation pattern will remain same. But if we change the cropping pattern, then every time the root development will be different, water requirement will be different, then we have a chance that more salts will be leaching down. And of course, whenever we use the saline water, if your water tables are deep and you have a drainage system, periodic leaching is very important to maintain the salt balance in the root zone. And if you can afford, the leaching preferably should be done with fresh water rather than saline water. These are the common practices which we use to maintain the salt balance in the soil while using poor quality waters.
So you think that, for instance, the use of wastewater could be a solution to leach out the salt from the irrigation with saline water?
Yeah, if it doesn't contain heavy metals, sure. Otherwise, we will have the risk to absorb, to add more heavy metals in the soil. But luckily, the water that we got from Dubai municipality treated wastewater, the amount of heavy metals that it contains was very, very low. So our experiment showed it was almost negligible. So that was the excellent water to use for irrigation, and that can also be used for leaching also. Because it does not contain the amount of heavy metal that can be hazardous for the soil management in the long run.
Okay, thank you very much. And I mean, we're nearly on time to finish with the webinar, and I have to thank the speakers for keeping it on the time and for being generous with their contributions to the questions made by the attendants. And then as a final remark, I will say that I agree with all of you that the water value needs to be added into the agricultural commodities. So we need to treat agriculture in a more corporate way, and then start introducing some of the value of saving the water resources into the price of food. And this is going to be a long discussion for sure, but it's important. So, and with that, I would like to thank all of you for your kind contribution, and thank you for attending the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.